It's a Friday. It's the last week, I mentioned, of September in college football. October starts, and it's amazing. The schedule just keeps on rolling along. And Baylor, Oklahoma State again tomorrow. Our pregame, 12:30 on the CW channel and here on 365 Sports. Grayson Grundhoefer with us. Grayson, last year, these two games, even though Chapin had that remarkable first half, last year there was still like a turf war between Oklahoma State and Baylor. Do you see that of the personalities or this game coming up tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that a little bit. I definitely think that, you know, when you go back and watch those games, both of those games were so physical. And both of them were just a war in the trenches because both teams were so strong on the defensive lines, especially. And that's going to be the case again this year. And so I think you're going to see two teams trying to establish what they want to do. I also think that, you know, last year I really felt like both teams were trying to turn around and hand the ball off a ton. And while Baylor's still doing that, I think Oklahoma State is actually at a point right now where, you know, they're not running the ball the way that they, I think, want to be. And so I think you might see them try to spread it out a little bit more. Teams have had some success in that regard against Baylor. And so for that reason, I don't think this game is necessarily going to look like the two games from last year. But I definitely think there's, you know, emotions are going to be high. Oklahoma State's looking for payback. And, you know, frankly, Baylor's looking for payback because I don't think Baylor felt like they gave their best effort when they played in Stillwater last year. So, yeah, a lot on the line. Two teams that feel like they're the best in the Big 12 and the best in the new Big 12 going at it. So it should be fun.
Grayson, what do you think is a weakness that Baylor can exploit against that Oklahoma State defense?
Yeah, you know, they lost a lot, guys, on the defensive side, especially in the secondary and at linebacker. And also Jim Knowles, you know, their defense coordinator. He's at Ohio State now, so Derek Mason is in there. And Knowles was a really, really good coach, and we saw that last year. He had a lot of veterans on that defense a year ago, but they lost a lot of those guys. They lost two starting linebackers. They lost a ton in their secondary, whether it was through transfer portal or graduation. So they're starting young, talented guys, and they are talented, but they're young, and so you're seeing those mistakes on film constantly. You know, in the Central Michigan game, they gave up quite a few explosive plays. Now, I don't read too much into that game because the score was 51-15 before Central Michigan really started putting up big numbers. But if you look a little bit, you know, further down their schedule, when they played Arizona State, they were giving up some of those explosive plays again to a team that is frankly not very good. So OSU had a lot to work on. Good news for them, they had the bye week, so I expect their defense to look a lot better than it has in previous weeks. But ultimately, you know, as far as one area, I do think it's the secondary. I think Blake Chapin's going to have a lot of opportunities to take shots downfield. I think there's going to be a lot of receivers who are going to be running open. So it's going to be up to Chapin to just continue to move the chains. And then when he gets opportunities to, you know, take advantage in one-on-one, he needs to be able to hit on those.
Grayson, what's maybe something that we haven't seen or something that you had confirmed last week in that win?
Yeah, you know, I think that when you look at kind of last week's game and you kind of take a step back, and I think everyone kind of walked into that game thinking, okay, you know, is Baylor just literally only going to be able to turn around and hand the ball off all year? Like, are they going to be able to create explosive plays in the passing game, which is what we thought was going to happen with Blake Chapin? But, you know, for obvious reasons, there were question marks about it, especially after the BYU game, a game that, you know, I've talked about a few times that they would regret. And it's clear that, you know, they should regret it because BYU's not as good as I think we thought they were at the beginning of the year. But Baylor couldn't throw the ball against BYU, not effectively enough. So in this Iowa State game, they really proved something to me. You know, seeing Hal Presley make a big play down the sideline, seeing Ben Sims continue to thrive in this offense, seeing Gavin Holmes, you know, make a huge impact with Monterey Baldwin still, you know, coming back from injury. I was very impressed, and I think, you know, all the credit goes to the offensive line, the coaches, the wide receivers, but especially Blake Chapin, because he looked much more cool, confident, collected in Ames than he did earlier in the year when they played in Provo.
You know, it is interesting, and they have had Spencer Sanders' number. You can't rely on turnovers, but do you still think they'll probably get a couple from him?
Yeah, so I feel like this is a good point to mention this stat because I know all stats don't matter, but I think this one does. So Spencer Sanders' 2 best performances in his career have come in bowl games. Miami in 2020 and Notre Dame last year. He completed 67% of his passes for 676 yards and 8 touchdowns, also 170 yards rushing. So he's basically averaging, 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in those games. And what those games have in common is he basically got a month to prep for those games. So if you look at this matchup and you look at Oklahoma State's first 3 games of the year and then the bye week, there really wasn't a whole lot to prepare for in my eyes. Like the 3 teams they played are not very good. So I think Oklahoma State's been prepping for this defense for a long time. And for that reason, I think Spencer Sanders is going to look far better than he has in these past couple of performances. I know he's got 10 interceptions in, games against Baylor dating back to, I believe it's 2019. So he's had problems against Baylor for a while. But I think you're going to see a much better version of Spencer Sanders in this game. Now, am I anticipating he's going to go for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns? No. But I think he can go for, 250 yards to 300 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns, and maybe only 1 interception instead of, the 7 that we saw in 2 games last year. So I think he's going to take care of the ball a little bit more, and I think Baylor's going to have a lot more to deal with him. And they're also getting back to their top wide receiver, Jaden Gray, who gave Baylor headache in the Big 12 championship game. So I think he's going to help make them even more explosive in the passing game as well.
Obviously, you can throw for more runs than you usually run for, but do you feel like Sanders can actually hurt Baylor more because of his legs in a game like this?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest area, that concerns me with Spencer Sanders is the first down running ability and the red zone running ability. He's a pretty big guy. He's pretty athletic. He's pretty strong. So, when he's able to get outside the pocket on a 3rd and 8 and he's able to run for a first down, that can be a little bit demoralizing. And Baylor hasn't played many quarterbacks who are as athletic as Spencer Sanders. I would say they haven't played any who are as athletic as Spencer, at least this year. I know Jaron Hall's a good athlete, but he's not the level of Spencer Sanders. So I do think that's another factor to take into consideration because we've seen in his biggest game, he really gets it going with his legs. And he did that against Notre Dame last year in the bowl game. And so Baylor's going to, I think, really try to keep him in the pocket and just try to make him stand in the pocket, be a pure pocket passer, and try to throw into tight windows. And that's where they had success a year ago because he wasn't able to do that. And Baylor was able to get pressure with their defensive line.
Grayson, how do you feel about the young running backs and now some of the wide receivers that showed out a little bit last week? Not totally break out, but starting to maybe peek their head out of the gopher hole.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be another week without Tay McWilliams. So you're going to see Richard Reese, Squirrel, and Quaylen Jones. And, I don't think there's a ton to say on those guys. I think we kind of know what they are at this point, and I think they're a good group. I think we're seeing them continue to get better each week. Richard Reese has been really productive and really impressive in the early going, and I think they're going to ride those 3 guys until Tay gets back. Once Tay comes back, I do think he'll kind of claim a big part of the offense as well. But I think Richard Reese has basically solidified himself a role in this running attack now. As far as receivers go, you know what you're getting with Dabney and Sims. Both of those guys have been extremely solid, and they continue to be. Those are 2 guys who are going to have very good games against Oklahoma State. They're going to continue to be very consistent, and Baylor's going to continue to utilize them. Now, wide receiver, that's where things get kind of interesting, right? So I think Gavin Holmes' performance was really encouraging. But the question with him is, you can't really play Monterey and Gavin at the same time, or at least they haven't really done that in the past. So you're going to see them rotating a lot in that slot position because Baylor likes to have Ben Sims on the field in the other slot more times than not. So they're going to kind of rotate. So then on the outside, Hal Presley's been the guy that I thought, really needed to take a big step this year. He's got all the talent in the world. It just all needs to come together. I think we saw it flash a little bit on that 40-yard reception down the sideline against Iowa State, but it needs to happen more consistently. And he needs to become more of a, reception hog than he has been in the past, or at least this year, and get to a point where he's open more often than not and see if he can earn Chapin's trust. I think we're getting there, but it's not all the way there yet. And then on the other side, Seth Jones, Josh Cameron, those two guys, they've been reliable, but haven't really had huge moments quite yet. So I'm curious if those guys continue to grow. But overall, I was encouraged from last week. I think the passing game is starting to round into shape, and I think Blake Shapen is starting to get more comfortable, and I expect that to continue this week. And it's going to need to if Baylor's going to win this game.
You know, Rauschenberg continues to be a weapon on kickoffs because there's hardly any returns. What Power does is a punter. Gavin Holmes had the punt return for a touchdown. We know Monterey Baldwin or whoever at any time, who knows. But the field goal situation, I know that Mayers has been kicking. Hankins was the one who did most of the kicking last year with some clutch field goals and missed a couple. But is that something that concerns you, that they don't know who their kicker is?
Yeah, it does. But, I mean, this is really the story of Baylor football since at least I've been watching it. I mean, guys, have you ever seen anything like it where it's literally a year-by-year thing where great kicking one year, and then the same kicker comes back and just it can't make anything. And you're just like, what is going on here? And it's happened consistently ever since Andrew Jones graduated. It started to just be this thing where, oh my gosh, every year, you know, what are you going to get? And so now John Mayers, he looks like the guy who might have taken the lead in the role now. And that's a little surprising to me, but also it really shouldn't be, because he had a great year at one time. So, yeah, I mean, it is concerning. I'm just hoping that one of them can turn into a reliable kicker. And I don't think we clearly have an answer to that quite yet. I think we'll probably get more of an answer to that in the coming weeks when they're tasked with more high pressure field goals. But yeah, I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on for sure. And it's something that's driven me crazy with Baylor, football, because it's just the field goal kicking looks amazing one year, and then the same kicker comes back, and for some reason something happens and it just doesn't work. It's really bizarre.
Grayson, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Grayson, I just kind of echo what you said. It's not just for Baylor. To me, it's kind of across the board that, like, it would be less shocking to me, and I don't know why it is, if there were only like 5 bad kickers in the world, because it seems like everybody knows that you're going to kick in football, that there would be better coaching and better players and better long snappers and better this, but it's just not the case.
Well, the guy from Oklahoma who broke all the records, he was basically 95% automatic. Dicker, the kicker, was deadly. He missed a couple, but, again, he was there, and he continually, I don't know if he was as good as his freshman year as he was his senior year.
No, he definitely wasn't. Kind
of fell off because he was so dynamic, but, Texas has had tons of good kicking. They've had a couple that have gone astray. But, yeah, that's one thing that just seems like it's almost like a little bit like a roller coaster, and it would be nice. I think you want to know, because when they won in 2019, despite not beating anybody ranked, and when they won last year, the kicking game and clutch field goals to win games in overtime or to win games was big, to give you that little extra oomph. Grayson, thanks for your time. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com with us, recruiting analyst, co-host of the Bearcast, and also football analyst on Fridays here on 365 Sports.